So my nephew wanted a picture of Batman drawing for his birthday, and he said he wanted the colours to be black and green. So I chose this panel from Frank Miller's classic Batman story, The Dark Knight Returns, because it's got a kind of a glow from the computer screen on Batman's face. So I figured I could do that with the greens. So I drew it out on tan paper, and I started with cool grey number 4 using the brush tip. And I quickly figured out that that was going to take quite a long time to fill the space that I had. So I quickly flipped over to using the chisel nib and then filled in the rest of the background using the chisel nib. And this is cool grey number 4 because I want the background to be fairly dark. Now I'm working slightly differently to usual. I'm putting the markers on first and I'm going to do my inks second. This is because I want to use the brush pen to ink with, and I found that before, when I put the brush pen on first and then use pro markers or flex markers afterwards, it would smudge the ink lines. I don't want that to happen, so I'm doing things in a completely different way to I normally do them. I'm doing the markers first, and you can see me using quite a lot of the darkest marker here. This is cool grey number 5, and I'm going to put the ink lines on second because I want to use the brush pen because it gives you a variable line width. You get lovely thick and thin lines, whereas with the technical pen it's a bit more difficult to get that kind of look. So here you can see me filling in some of these bits of technology afterwards with the cool grey number 4, and that's because I was worried that the pencil lines might get lost underneath the dark marker, so I thought I'd go around the outlines and then fill in afterwards. With the basic marker colours in, nice and flat, it's time to get down to the fun bit, and this is the brush pen, the inking. So all the ink lines, the classic sort of things that you would see in comic book, and I love using the brush pen because, as I've pointed out, you can get such a variable kind of line width. You can go from really thick to really thin lines straight away and get those really nice brush strokes showing in your inks, which gives whatever drawing you're doing a kind of a nice old school comic book flavour, like the comic book artists from the 50s and 60s used to have. You know, that real kind of Jack Kirby kind of vibe. So I love using the brush pen. It also uses terrific ink, which gives you a really nice, quite flat, quite solid black, you know, really, really good contrast. So I skipped forward a little bit because my big head got in the way with all my grey hair, and you couldn't see me doing that delicate ink on the left hand side. So here we are on the right hand side, and you can see me trying to use the brush pen in the way that I've described, doing some very light lines to suddenly pressing down a little bit harder and going to a nice big thick line for this the folds in his cape on this right hand side of the picture. An ink technical pen or an ink fine line pen would give me lots of control over the lines, but it wouldn't give me this kind of easy variation in the thickness that you can see me getting here. It would give me lots of little light fine lines, and you'd have to really double up to make them a bit thicker. So that's why I like using the brush pen, because it's so easy to get a thick or a thin line, you know, just really, really quickly, less fuss. Oh, it looks like my grey hair is trying to make a reappearance here in the frame, so I think it popped in again, so I just transitioned this section as well, so you can see I've done some of the finer lines around the kind of the chin strap. You might be looking at this at the moment and looking at the flat grey colours that I've done and wondering how I'm going to achieve depth and a 3D kind of quality in this picture. Well, I am planning to use watercolor pencils, nice soft watercolor pencils, to add highlights to this after I finish the inks. Now, when I came to ink these delicate bits of machinery at the top of the picture, I found it a bit easier having done the background and then filling in the machinery, because as you can see there's lots of very, very faint little lines where I didn't go right up to the edge of the marker colors. So you can see there's little white lines making the edge almost like an outline, and all I have to do with the black pen, the ink pen, is to kind of go over and do my best to kind of hide those white lines by actually making them black using the ink pen. And I'm doing this with quite a lot of control by resting the side of my hand on a piece of paper so I don't smudge anything, and also it gives me tons of control to really just use the very, very tip of the brush pen and trying to make sure I don't get a really thick fat line when I'm trying to do delicate lines. I think one of the other things that I like about using the brush pen is it's a kind of a one-stop shop in terms of a drawing tool. I don't have to swap to a different pen in order to do some really, really fine, delicate lines. I can do fine, delicate lines and thick lines and big filled areas of ink just using the brush pen. And here I go over the pencil lined, the outline, the frame of the entire picture using the brush pen, and that allows me to do an uneven line. So it's like an old photograph, like some of those old black and white photographs you see where you get kind of an outline at edge and it's a bit blobby and a bit thin in places. The brush pen allows me to do that. So instead of a constant thickness line going all the way around this picture, I can achieve an undulating line instead, which is it's just a bit more expressive and arty. So time to do the shadows on Batman's mask. And here the pencil line showing some of the highlights really did get covered over by the number 5 cool grey. So I had to kind of think on my feet a little bit, and you see me outline some of these areas first of all and then fill in all of the black ink around those areas in order to have those kind of crinkles in his forehead. So with the markers on and the inks on, the next thing I have to start thinking about is the white highlights and the white areas I'm going to put in. And the first ones that I put in are the very brightest white highlights. And I do this using a POSCA paint pen, so that it will be a really nice, opaque, bright white. And then I can use that to help me judge how much of the white pencil that I need to use later on to do some of the other areas that are highlights on his face. This was the reason that I decided to use tanned paper instead of white paper, because then hopefully the white highlights in both pen and pencil that I'm going to put on are going to show up a lot more strongly and a lot more forcefully because they're on tanned paper to begin with. So here I go using a Derwent watercolor pencil, a white, I think it's Chinese white, watercolor pencil. And the reason I chose a watercolor pencil was because I did a couple of little tests with other white pencils I've got, and they didn't show up so much. Because the watercolor pencil is a very, very soft pencil to begin with, a lot of that color comes off on the surface of your paper. So it was able to get a much stronger kind of white look from this pencil than I would have with a different, slightly harder pencil. So that's why I chose the watercolor one. And here you can see me put in quite a lot of white towards the bottom edge of his mask, and then just gently shading it sort of upwards and fading out into the grey of his mask. So you've got that highlights along the bottom edge and then just gradually fading out, hopefully. Another reason that I chose this white watercolor pencil was because it didn't smudge so much as well. You'd think with a soft pencil that there's going to be way more smudging of that white and smearing it across the face, but that didn't actually happen so much with this. With some of the other white pencils that I've got, they're made almost like pastel-y or chalk kind of pencils, and I got a heck of a lot of smudging when I tried using those. Here you can see me put in bright white highlights on the actual face. This is his skin. So I've left his skin the color of the tan paper, and I'm using the white to show where the kind of glow from below would sort of shine white bits onto his face. So where you've got creases in his face and wrinkles in his face, you're going to get some highlights there. On the bottom of his chin and also on his bottom lip, as you can see me doing here, you're going to get quite a lot of highlighted areas on those areas that are usually in a bit of shadow. So once I got the basic white areas done on the face and the mask, I just went back in and added a bit more white where I wanted the highlights to be stronger. I went in at this stage and made some of those highlights stronger so that the kind of effect of a glow from below is much, much stronger. And here you can see me start to add some highlights to the chin strap. It's either a chin strap or it's some kind of microphone type thing in front of his face, and just adding some edged highlights there, nothing too fancy. And then you see me just go over the entire picture, adding the bits that are going to be white. So some of these bits of machinery hanging in over his head there, they needed some white highlights on, some white highlights across the back of the seat, and finishing off some of those white highlights that are running on all the equipment and machinery, and even his cape. His cape is catching some light as it's being sort of shone up from below. And you've got to put those little bits of highlight in to sort of achieve that kind of 3D effect. And when I'm putting the highlights on the belt buckles there, I press down quite hard and I do quite a sharp, white, shiny metal highlight straight away. So one of the last things that I do is add the green color. And this is supposed to be like the green glow of a computer screen. So what I do is I leave the white highlights as white, and then I sort of start the green a little bit after that. So you've got these bright white highlights on everything, and then hopefully the green glow begins just beyond that highlight. And when that's done, I just put in a few last minute extra white highlights just to sort of really exaggerate those white areas. And that's it, pretty much done. I hope you enjoyed this and got something out of it. If you did, please don't forget to subscribe or comment. And you could also check out some of my previous videos, recent stuff that I've done with pigment markers, or some of the other fan artwork that I've done on YouTube, and all the links for that are below.